Harry is desperate to get back one way or another. Meghan couldn't care two hoots.
Amen. She's selling her
in
booze.
California. She doesn't want to come back here.
Yeah.
She's got what she needed. She's got a title. The C-rated actress is now a global star. She's got everything and money. So for her, and that's what's so interesting, is the division.
Yes.
And of course, people always say, well, can the marriage last? I think Harry is so devoted to his children.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars. She hasn't got the money for it. And what's interesting is that there isn't a CEO, there's no chief executive of the As Ever brand to actually develop her products. So there she is. Now his wife trades off her husband's fame and fortune, or not so great fortune now. I mean, this is the problem. But we're still interested because, after all, he's a great character in our modern day.
And so he became hypersensitive and blamed the media for the crashes of his relationships, never thinking that they could have something to do with himself. So he's a very complicated, depressed, unintelligent man who is seeking a role and has got really nobody on whom he could rely, which is in the end where Meghan stepped in. I mean, a needy man met a woman who could help him with his needs.
Very aggressive PR for the Sussexes, got way beyond herself because she really doesn't understand the British royal family or Britain, but understands how to project her clients. And so I think she got it wrong by leaking it or even letting anyone know about it.
And of course, the news today that Harry's memoir is going to be published in the near future will just alarm the royal family here in England about what he's actually going to say to her.
Tom Bower just dropped a claim that flips the whole Harry and Meghan story on its head. According to the veteran royal biographer, there's a clause hidden deep in their prenup on page 14, clause 7, and Harry allegedly signed it without fully grasping what it really meant. And once you hear what that clause supposedly says, a lot of recent moves start looking very different, especially Meghan bringing Sunshine Sachs back in January 2026. Welcome to Crownara, where the royal drama gets unpacked piece by piece, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Subscribe now and join the channel for all the latest twists, shocking claims, and non-stop royal updates.
I think personally, they've separated their professional lives, but I think what's really a great problem for them now, as of the last few weeks, is that Meghan has got no real income anymore.
And Meghan herself,
in the months before she met Harry, was setting up paparazzi pictures in London. She now the paparazzi are literally the devil incarnate.
She begged the paparazzi to photograph her and they wouldn't. And when they did, she says, oh, I don't want to, I'm hurt. And that ridiculous story about how they first met, the whole thing was a tissue of inaccuracies, to be polite.
Because what do you make of that? Because as you know, Harry was always very...
It also starts to explain why money has reportedly been shifting around quietly since 2022. That's why Tom Bower is saying Harry could be standing on the edge of losing everything, and not in some small, messy way either, but in a full-blown, life-changing way. But before getting into that clause, here's the real kicker. Tom Bower isn't some random guy online throwing out wild rumors for clicks. He's a former barrister and a BBC investigative journalist with decades in the game. And this man built his name by digging into powerful people who thought nobody could touch them. He went after Robert Maxwell, the corrupt media tycoon, and pulled the curtain back on Mohammed Al Fayed's business dealings. He also exposed major details about Simon Cowell's empire. So when Bower puts something in print, people pay attention fast. That's because publishers don't play around with his work. They stand behind it with legal teams because his research is known for being tight, detailed, and hard to shake. For his book, Revenge, Tom Bower reportedly spoke to more than 80 people connected to Meghan, including palace staff, Hollywood associates, and legal professionals involved with her contracts. And that is exactly why this claim is hitting so hard. He doesn't lean on unnamed sources or random internet gossip. He builds his case the way he did as a lawyer, with paperwork, records, and material meant to hold up under serious scrutiny. So when Tom Bower says he has seen evidence tied to prenup clauses, he is not just throwing out guesses. He has reportedly spoken with legal professionals connected to drafting royal marriage agreements. He has also looked closely at how California law collides with British royal protocol, and what he says was found on page 14 is exactly why Meghan allegedly brought Sunshine Sachs back into the picture. And that matters because the firm is widely known for handling one very specific kind of storm, high-profile divorce fallout. Most prenups are usually simple enough. They spell out what each person had before the marriage, what happens to shared assets if things fall apart, and whether spousal support applies. They can also set timelines for when certain protections or financial terms start to count, which is standard in a lot of cases. But royal prenups are a whole different beast. They are designed to protect crown-related assets, including properties held in trust for future generations, and they can place limits on title use after a divorce. They may also include strict wording about public conduct and media activity, which makes them far more loaded than the average agreement.
And now presents her mother, Doria, speaking for the first time, telling outright lies about her ex-husband. I mean, this was a calculated attempt against the families.
Tom Bower, the legendary royal author, is sharpening his quill for a new edition of his book set to reveal huge secrets inside Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage.
Well, you know, Piers, you're the first person to say how limited Prince Harry is, unfortunately. Attacking William in that way, she'd be appalled by her son's behaviour. And that was, again, so nauseating, the way he kept on bringing in Diana, who appealed to the media all the time, who phoned journalists secretly, who brought Martin Bashir into her office, who cooperated with Andrew Morton, who kept on calling Richard Kay. I mean, this is ridiculous.
I do think the Sussex overdrive is unbelievable, but I mean, I don't think that he is going to get back in. I mean, I think that there are two reasons. One is I think that William wouldn't allow it, and secondly, the moment he got back to America, he immediately promoted Disney and his trip to Disney World, which showed that he is very commercially minded, which we'll get into later on, which makes it impossible.
The deal between Charles and Diana, for example, reportedly had detailed terms about how her title could be used after the separation. Prenup amendments happen way more often than most people think. When big life changes hit, like having children, buying property together, or launching businesses, couples often go back and update the original agreement so it matches the new reality. Tom Bower's investigation claims Harry and Meghan updated their prenup in 2020, right when everything in their world was changing fast. They were stepping away from royal life, moving to California, and locking in huge entertainment deals. On the surface, updating the paperwork made total sense. But what makes this alleged amendment stand out is the timing and what was happening around it. Tom Bower also reportedly spoke with lawyers connected to Meghan's first divorce from Trevor Engelson, and they described her as extremely careful during negotiations. They said she was the kind of person who read every line, questioned every clause, and stayed sharp through the whole process. She did not just rely on one lawyer either. She reportedly had a full team looking over the settlement, and that tells you she was not playing around. Those same legal sources told Tom Bower that Meghan came away from that first divorce with one major lesson: protect your earning power above everything else. When her marriage to Trevor ended, she reportedly walked away clean because the finances had been structured carefully from the start. Now look at what was happening with Harry around that same period. The Netflix deal was announced in September 2020. The Spotify deal followed after that, and Archewell was also being built up around the same time as a major business operation. According to Tom Bower, the prenup amendment was signed right in the middle of that whole money-moving, brand-building stretch, and that is where people really start raising eyebrows. Under California law, Meghan would already have a claim to a share of what was earned during the marriage.
This is the woman that the papers are citing for this reporting is a longtime royal insider, a socialite. She's been right. I've been following her because she's great TV. She's been right about a lot, and she's claiming she's heard from several sources now that he's hired a lawyer, and it happens to be somebody who's a great divorce lawyer and specializes in divorce. And it dovetails on other reports that he is spending a lot of his time in 2 hotels, one of which is in Montecito, another of which is not too far away, as an escape from her. It's entirely plausible. All they've done for 5 years is complain and moan and see themselves as downtrodden victims. That doesn't tend to spur a lot of feelings of love and happiness and close bonding. I mean, I guess in the crisis mode it might.
But according to Tom Bower's sources, the amendment allegedly gave her something even more powerful: control. Her name is said to appear first on key business filings, including Archewell documents, and the biggest detail is the claim that she secured a clause giving her majority ownership of their brand if they ever split. Tom Bower also reportedly spoke with people linked to Meghan's past legal team, and what they described about her approach to negotiations points to a pattern that has been sitting out in the open for years. Going all the way back to 2013, the picture they paint is of someone focused, careful, and always thinking 3 steps ahead. When Meghan divorced Trevor Engelson, Tom Bower says she made one thing very clear to her lawyers: she wanted a clean exit strategy that left her fully independent. No messy financial ties, no shared assets dragging things out, and no setup that would force ongoing contact after the marriage ended. The goal, according to those claims, was to walk away with her career untouched and her finances protected. Tom Bower also says Meghan first hired Sunshine Sachs in 2017, right around the time her relationship with Harry began. And Sunshine Sachs is not just some average PR company. The firm built its name handling major celebrity crisis moments, especially high-profile breakups and divorces, which is why that connection gets people talking fast.
At that moment last year, she was about to promote her Netflix series and didn't want to firstly be seen with Harry, and secondly didn't want to go somewhere where she'd appear cheap and give it gratis. And this year, she is desperate to be seen, and that's why she turned up. So I think she has a major problem, financially and professionally. And I think that Harry has a problem because he's lost his charity centre Bailey in Africa. He had better up in all these commercial deals.
They were famously involved in major public image battles, including Katie Holmes during her split from Tom Cruise, and they have been linked to many other big-name separations too. Then, in 2020, after Meghan and Harry had made huge changes in their lives, Sunshine Sachs was let go. The public explanation was budget cuts, but Tom Bower says sources inside the firm suggested there was a very different story behind that move. They were reportedly dropped because Meghan wanted to control the public story herself through Archewell's in-house communications. Then jump to January 2026, and suddenly Sunshine Sachs is back in the picture. Why now? Tom Bower says the answer looks obvious to anyone who knows how divorce PR usually works. You bring in the specialists months before anything becomes public, so they can start shaping coverage, guiding the tone, and building sympathy early. But Tom Bower says the bigger signal is not just the Sunshine Sachs rehire, it is the money moves Meghan has reportedly been making since 2022. He points to her lifestyle brand, launched as a separate business entity, and says that is where things start getting very interesting. The brand is tied to her name. The trademarks reportedly do not include Harry, and that has only made the speculation louder. She has also reportedly been seen attending business meetings in Los Angeles on her own, and Tom Bower argues that this follows the same kind of strategy seen in her earlier split from Trevor. Build a separate professional identity, set up independent income streams, create a life that does not lean financially on a spouse. That is the pattern he says stands out, and it is why these moves are getting so much attention. And according to Tom Bower, the strongest clue is not even the prenup by itself, but the financial setup that has been taking shape since 2022. Once you line that up with the timing of the business activity, the Sunshine Sachs return, and the solo branding moves, his theory starts to look a lot more calculated.
Promotional campaign to try and suggest that everything is rosy in their very, very rocky marriage. Not so fast, says Radar Online, which has revealed that the Sussex couple are now sleeping in separate beds. Let me take you through this bombshell, then we're going to get reaction from the royal YouTube sensation, according to Taz. Here's the report, though, from Radar Online. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's marriage is said to be under major strain as backlash has gotten under the Duchess's skin so much that she's sleeping apart from her husband and wondering whether or not she would be more popular on her own, Radar Online can reveal. Amid ongoing rumours about the Sussex's marriage being on the rocks, insiders told us Markle is cracking under the pressure of public scrutiny as she tries to claw her way back into Hollywood and launch her lifestyle brand, leaving her marriage to Harry hanging by a thread. Insiders told us Markle is starting to unravel and wonder if she would be better off as a solo act. Meghan is said to have even started to look up divorce lawyers. Sources claimed Harry was confronted by his unhappy.
Even the Netflix deal, widely reported as being worth $100 million, may not be as simple as the headlines made it sound, because Bauer says entertainment insiders explained that deals like that are often far more complicated behind the scenes. That $100 million figure was never just one giant check handed over on day one. It was reportedly the top end of the deal, the kind of number they could reach only if Harry and Meghan delivered everything laid out in the contract. Some projects did happen, like the documentary series and Meghan's cooking show, but others did not move forward, including Pearl, the animated series that was canceled. Several of the other ideas tied to that original agreement also never fully took off. According to Tom Bauer's sources, the total Netflix payout may have been closer to $40 million before the deal reportedly shifted into a first-look arrangement, and that is where his timeline starts getting people really talking. In 2022, right around the period when some of those projects were struggling or stalling, Meghan reportedly began filing trademark applications for American Riviera Orchard, a solo business move that stood apart from Archewell. Tom Bauer claims she also brought in lawyers to set up business entities separate from Archewell, and he argues that this was not random timing at all. He says the reported $38 million in debt is not just about overspending, but may reflect a broader financial reshaping strategy. He also points to the Montecito home setup, saying it appears structured in a way that may offer protection under California homestead laws, while other investments were reportedly moved into separate accounts.
To a certain extent, they love each other, but we have a couple who has had a really unnecessarily difficult existence. And that's not the fault of the media. That is not the fault of his family. That's been their fault. Everything that has happened to them has been broadly their fault. And they can't seem to help recognize that. And so what they're doing, though, as things go sort of off the rail, is that they're regressing to, let's say, an earlier stage in life.
Tom Bauer says he spoke with financial advisors who work with wealthy clients preparing for divorce, and they told him these moves match a very familiar pattern of asset protection. The American Riviera Orchard trademark was reportedly filed in Meghan's name alone, not jointly with Harry. Her podcast deal with Lemonada Media is also described as a solo arrangement, and even The Bench was presented as her own. Separate project with no direct financial tie to Harry. That is why Tom Bauer identifies 2022 as the major turning point. In his view, that was the moment Meghan appeared to shift away from joint projects and toward building more solo ventures. He also claims that was when public appearances with Harry became less frequent, unless there was a clear reason or obligation for them to appear together. According to his theory, that is the point where a long-term exit plan may have started moving from private planning into real action. Tom Bauer claims that the prenup amendment gave Meghan the legal base to make a major move, and his timeline is blunt and intense. He believes a divorce filing could come within 6 months of January 2026, which is why so many people are watching that date so closely. In his view, the timing is not random at all. It lines up with how California divorce law works, and with the bigger pattern he says has been building behind the scenes. According to that theory, California is already firmly established as Meghan's permanent residence, which means the residency requirement would not be the obstacle here. Tom Bauer says the real trigger is the moment divorce papers are filed, because that is when several key parts of the agreement would allegedly start kicking in automatically.
What is happening? There is complete and utter chaos going on. The Meg and Harold are taking their rebrands far too literally at this point. Archewell, their charity effort, has not only changed its name from a foundation to Philanthropies, which is even worse branding, I might add, but there is a whole slew of drama going on behind the scenes.
He claims title rules would come into play, the asset division process would begin, and the biggest battle of all could center on who controls the couple's brand and intellectual property going forward. If his version is right, Harry could be facing a brutal outcome. The Montecito house could become part of the asset split, Archewell control could shift, and there could be a serious fight over future rights tied to their public image and business identity. Bauer also argues that Harry may have signed terms he did not fully understand, and if that is true, the fallout could be massive. The custody issue in this telling is where things get especially tense. Tom Bauer argues that if Meghan can show she has been the more consistent parent while Harry handled travel, court matters, and other obligations, California courts would likely focus on keeping stability for the children. That is why this part of the story gets so much attention, because it raises the stakes in a way that goes far beyond money alone. But the biggest question hanging over all of this is simple. Does Harry see what may be coming? Tom Bauer's view is that Harry may sense something is off, but still does not fully understand the legal position he could be in. And according to that argument, the clearest clue is not just in the paperwork, but in Harry's recent public behavior, especially the way he appeared in that London courtroom. And this is where Tom Bauer's theory takes an even darker turn. He says the biggest warning sign is not one dramatic headline, but a long chain of smaller moves that start to look connected when you put them side by side. The separate branding, the solo business filings, the PR shift, the legal structure, all of it points to one possibility in his view: careful preparation rather than chaos.
This is astonishing, but remember, it comes just weeks after that Vanity Fair bombshell that Meghan is already shopping the post-divorce book to publishers.
Meghan has clearly...
What makes that idea hit so hard is how quiet the strategy seems to be. No loud public blow-up, no obvious announcement, no messy scene playing out in front of cameras. Instead, it looks more like a slow setup behind closed doors, where every move is made early so nothing feels sudden when the real break finally comes. That is why Bauer believes Harry may not be reacting properly, because the problem does not look like a crisis until it is already too late. He also argues that image matters just as much as money in a split like this. Whoever controls the public narrative first usually gains a huge advantage, especially when the brand itself is worth millions. And if Meghan is the one with the stronger solo platform, the cleaner business identity, and the more polished media strategy, then Harry could be left trying to defend himself after. The public has already picked a side. That is the real fear inside Bauer's timeline. Not just separation, but a full power shift where Harry is left with less control, less leverage, and a shrinking place in the story he helped create. And Tom Bauer says there is one more detail people should not ignore: timing around public appearances. When couples are truly solid, their business moves, media strategy, and public image usually line up in a natural way. But when the image starts looking polished, while the personal side feels distant, that is when rumors get louder and questions get harder to dismiss. In Bauer's view, that is exactly what has been happening here. The appearances seem more controlled, the messaging feels more calculated, and the independent projects keep stacking up one after another. That does not prove a split on its own, but he argues it fits the pattern of someone making sure every piece is in place before a major personal and legal shift. He also believes Harry may be in a weaker position than many people realize, not because he has no voice, but because his strongest asset has always been his personal story. And if legal terms limit how far he can use that story in future deals, then the room to recover could get very tight, very fast. That is where Bauer says the pressure becomes real, because this stops being just a marriage story and turns into a business fight with serious consequences. And if that fight does explode into public view, Bauer thinks the shock will not come from the divorce itself. The real shock will come from how many signs were sitting there in plain sight the whole time, while most people were still looking the other way. The arguing in court, the emotional pressure, the visible frustration, and Harry speaking about how the media has made his wife's life miserable, all of that is what Tom Bauer points to as a major red flag. In his view,
You're talking about articles that were written between 2001 and 2013, 3 years before you allegedly met your wife. So what does Meghan have anything to do with this trial? Well, as the answer turns out, it has everything to do with Prince Harry's motivation and his miserable existence right now, because his wife is miserable, she's making his life miserable, and everybody's living in absolute misery, and Harry only has himself to blame, because no matter if he wins this trial or not, he's still going to be miserable. I am going to do a deep dive into Meghan Markle's abysmal performance on Netflix. It's really bad, guys. She lost 60+% of her audience between season 1 and 2 of With Love Meghan. That's really, really bad. So definitely something to go over, but obviously with everything going on with Harry today, I feel like it's a need to talk about his big boy man tears. He's so emotional, guys. His poor wife, she lives in misery in her $16 million mansion with her 4.4 million followers on Instagram, her Netflix deal, her show on Netflix, all these sorts of things. And
That is not the body language of someone who feels secure and settled. He argues it looks more like someone who senses that something is deeply wrong, but cannot clearly see where the damage started or how to stop it. Tom Bower also says sources close to Harry described him as feeling more isolated over time. He claims concerns were raised about the financial risk tied to these court battles, yet the legal fights kept moving forward anyway. And that is where his theory turns really explosive, because he suggests Harry may have been taking on serious exposure without fully understanding how the fallout could land if the marriage ever broke apart. That leads to Bower's most dramatic conclusion of all. He believes Harry may have signed terms in 2020 that were not just about protecting the marriage, but about setting the stage for what would happen if it ended. In his reading, page 14, clause 7 is the detail that could change everything. And he argues Harry may only now be starting to understand what it could mean. So what do you think? Was this all careful planning from the start, or is Tom Bower connecting dots that do not really prove anything? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't leave this one here. Like the video, subscribe, share it with someone following this story, and comment with your take. Because if more twists come out, this story could get even wilder.